Okay, so let's take a look at our two opener problems here. The first one, how do we set that up? We have the 29. What do we have to make sure we do with the next one? Line up decimal. Put the decimal point at the end of the 29. So 7 point, that decimal point goes there. Now what do we need to do? Put in the zeros. Good. And then we got to borrow. The 0 minus 8 can't be done, so we need to borrow. Nothing here to borrow from. So we go to the 9. This is 8. That becomes a 10. And we just keep borrowing until we get to where we need to be down here. Now we can subtract. 10 minus 8, 2. 9 minus 3, 9 minus 6. Bring down the decimal point. 8 minus 7 is 1, and then the 2. The division over here, a little bit more difficult. First of all, when we set this up, is it going to be 24.73 that I put under here? No, what am I going to put under here? 247.3. Why? Because this is going to be 35. I had to move this decimal point over 1, so I had to move that decimal point over 1. So now we go to divide. Does 35 go into 2? Nope. 24? 247. Yeah, it'll go in there, what, 7 times? So put it over the 7, because that's the last digit we used. And what does that give us? 245, I believe? With 2 left over. Before we bring down the 3, what do we have to do? Move up the decimal point, bring down the 3. 35 into 23? No, so what do we have to do? If I put a 0 here, then we can add a 0 and bring it down. 35 into 230. Might be 6 times. Would be 210 with 20 left over. Are we done? We said we wanted to go to the nearest 100th. All done? One more 0. 35 into 200 goes 5 times. 5 times 35 would be 175. So that tells us that the answer is really going to be what? 7.07. Very good. Any questions on those? Any questions from the homework that you want me to go over? Okay, well then. Okay, there are a few of you still working on the quiz, and as always, feel free to take as much time as you need to finish it up. We're going to go ahead and start on our new topic today. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to start talking at least about percents. To understand how percents work, you first have to understand the word percent. It's actually 2 words. Per, if you think of miles per gallon or miles per hour, it means for each or out of. And cent. Think of years in a century or cents in a dollar, it's 100. So percent literally means out of 100. So 38% literally means 38 out of 100. Or we could write it as a ratio. That notation looks like a fraction, and it kind of is. Means 38 out of 100. In fact, it is just that simple to change a percent into a fraction. 38%, 38 out of 100, we make it 38 over 100. Now, we wouldn't leave it like that because both of those numbers can be divided by 2. So we would reduce it to 19/50ths as a fraction. So what if I have 65%? What's that going to become as a fraction? Well, I'd start out with 65 over 100 Then both of those can be reduced by 5. 65 divided by 5 is 13. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 65% becomes 13/20ths. 48% would become, well, 48 out of 100. Both of those can be reduced by, well, they're both even, so they'll be reduced by 2. So 24 out of 50. Are we done? No. Still be reduced by 2. Good. Give us 12 over 25. So 48% is 12 out of 25, or 12/25 as a fraction. How about 380%? Well, just like any other percent, it's 380 out of 100. So 380 over 100. But now we notice that that is an improper fraction. So how many times can I get 100 out of 380? 3 times, and how much is left over? 80 over 100. Now, of course, we can reduce the 80 over 100. Both of those can be divided by, what's that? 4. Okay. So divided by 4, we've got 20 over 25. They can still be reduced by 5. There's 4 over 5. All done? Got to remember the 3. Perfect. So 3 4/5. 18 1/3%. Well, it's going to become 18 1/3 over 100. But we don't like having fractions within our fractions. So how are we going to get rid of it? Well, you look at the denominator of the fraction. It is 3. So if I multiply by 3, it will get rid of the fraction. So I can multiply by 3 on top and bottom. 100 times 3 is 3. 18 1/3 times 3 becomes times 3 over 1. 18 1/3, we have to change it to an improper fraction. 18 times 3 is 54, plus 1 is 55. So 55/3 times 3 over 1. 3's cross-cancel to make 1 and 1. So we got 55 over 1, or just 55. So 55 over 300 is our fraction. Both of those, of course, can be reduced by 5. Give me 11 over 60. How about 62.5%? Well, just like any other, it's going to be 62.5 over 100. But we don't like having decimals within our fractions either. How would I get rid of that decimal? Well, just like we did when we were dividing decimals, I got to move it over a spot, so I'm going to multiply by 10. I'll do the same on bottom. So this now becomes 625 over 1,000. And both of those can be divided by, most of you would see the 5, but it can actually be divided by 125. Give me 5/8. So for you to try, convert to fraction. (237.5%) and 36 2/3%. Convert those to exact fractions. So for our first one, of course, 237.5 over 100. But we don't like the decimals in our fractions. So what's it going to become? 2,375 over 1,000. But it's improper, so we're going to split it up to be 2 And 375 over 1,000. It can be reduced by what? 5, 25, and 125. Or you just reduce by 5 3 times if you wanted to. So 375 divided by 125 is 3. 1,000 divided by 125 is 8. And don't forget the 2. How many of you got 2 3/8 for that one? Good deal. 36 2/3, of course, is 36 2/3 over 100. We have to get rid of the fraction, get rid of the third, so we're going to multiply by 3. 100 times 3 is 300. 36 2/3 times 3 is 110. So we can reduce that by dividing by 10, top and bottom, giving you 11 over 30. How many of you got 11 over 30 for that one? Just a couple of you? That one was kind of tricky. Well, we can also look at changing our percents to decimals. We said 38% is just automatically 38 out of 100. Well, instead of reducing that fraction, we can change it to a decimal directly from that form. And to change a fraction to a decimal, you're just going to divide the numerator by the denominator. 38 divided by 100 is 0.38. Well, any percent, if we write it as a fraction without reducing it, like 73% is going to be 73 out of 100. So I'm always going to be dividing by 100. And dividing by 100 simply moves the decimal point 2 spots over to the left. So if I have 91%, it's just going to become what as a decimal? 0.91. How about 80%? 0.8. Could be 0.80 if you wanted to, but it doesn't have to be. 7%. 0.07. 320%. 3.2. 6.4%. 0.064. Good. 3.5%. That'd be 3.5% if I change the fractional percent to a decimal percent. Then 0.035. How about 1/4%? Well, 0.25 is still a percent. That's just changing the fractional percent to a decimal. That has to be 2 spots over, 0.0025. What do you think? Not terrible? So let's have you try some. Convert to decimal. %, 37%, 4.2%, and 3/4%. Convert those to decimals. So 210% becomes 2.1. 37%, 0.37. 4.2%. 0.042, and 3/4%, 0.0075. Any questions on those? Okay. Well, our next step is to go the other direction. If I have a decimal like 0.66, that really means 0.66 out of 1. If I want to change it into a percent, of course, a percent is always out of 100. So if I think of it like this as equivalent fractions, to get from 1 to 100, I have to multiply by 100. So I have to multiply the 0.66 by 100, which would be 66. So 66 out of 100, or 66 As you can see here, each time that decimal will always be out of 1. So each time to change it to a percent, I'm going to be multiplying by 100, or moving the decimal point back 2 spots to the right. So 0.98 becomes what percent? 98%. 0.3 becomes 30%. 2.74 becomes 274%. 0.039 becomes 3.9%. Good. Let's have you guys try a few. Convert to percents. 7.1, 0.38, 0.044, and we'll call that good. Oh, 0.1. We'll call those good. So 7.1 is going to become what percent? 710%. 0.38, 38%. 0.44 or 0.044, 4.4%. And 0.1, 10%. Good. Changing our fractions back into percents can be a little bit trickier. So let's start with one that we all know. 3/4 is what percent? 75%. Good. If we didn't know that off the top of our head, there's a couple of different ways we could have approached it. We could have done 3 divided by 4 to turn it into a decimal of 0.75, and then move the decimal point to make it 75%. Or we treat 3/4 as 3 out of 4, and we know a percent is out of 100. And in this form, we have a couple of different ways we can handle it. We could look at this and say, okay, 4 times 25 is 100, so 3 times 25 is 75. So 75%. But sometimes we run into fractions where that doesn't work so easily, like 5/8. What do you multiply 8 by to turn it into 100? Well, it would be 12.5. Well, that's not a real nice number to work with. Not one you would come up with real easily on your own either. So what they've done, what we have is we have a process that allows us to calculate that. It's called cross multiplying. If this were a missing number, you'd do 8 times x is 8x, 5 times 100 is 500, and those two have to be equal to each other. It'd require you to solve a basic equation. Well, we haven't covered equations yet, which we're going to cover those in a couple of weeks. But the shortcut for this, rather than multiplying in both directions and writing an equation, is you find the two numbers that are on the diagonal, which is the 5 and 100, and you multiply those together. 5 times 100 is 500. Then you take the third number that's over here on the other diagonal with our missing number, and you're going to divide by it. So you're going to divide by 8. That'll give you 62.5. 62.5 out of 100, or 62.5%. So if we had 6/7, wanted to make that a percent out of 100, 6 times 100 is 600. Dividing by 7 will give us 85.714286 approximately out of 100, or rounded to the nearest hundredth of a percent, 85.71%. Any questions? So let's have you try one, or 2, or 3. Convert to percents. 2/5. 3/4. 3/11ths, and 2 1/8. So 2/5 is going to be how much out of 100? 2 times 100 is 200 divided by 5 is 40 out of 100, or 40%. 3/11ths. 3 times 100 is 300 divided by 11 is 27.2727, or 27.27%. 2 1/8. Well, before you can do this one, you have to change it into an improper fraction. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 1 is 17/8. Is how much out of 100? You cross multiply and divide. 17 times 100 is 1700. Divided by 8 is 212.5. So 212.5%. How many of you got that last one? Good deal. Well, it's time to let you guys work on your own. Out of your book, page 79 to 80. 1 through 81, the odds.
Todd, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
On Friday, how many years will it be since we've had 9/11 attacks?
Well, what year is it this year?
2015,
What year was the attack?
2001.
What's 15 minus 1?
That's in 14 years.
14 years. There you go.
I remember the day when I was watching it when they actually killed Bin Laden, and people were partying like no tomorrow when that happened.
Where are you heading to, Tyler?
Start success center to do my work.
Okay. Have a good one.
Yep. See you tomorrow.
Do that.
Like usual, 3 days a week.
Take her easy.
Oh yeah. Yesterday's math was a little difficult for me, but then I finally figured out with some help from Karen.
Karen?
And
Good.
they roasted me all day long at my mouth. I was like, oh my god.
Sure.